Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Sanchit and I'm a psychiatry trainee in the UK. And today we have with us Upasana, who is a paediatrics trainee who's come up all the way from London.
Hello.
On this episode, we're going to just go through exactly why Upasana chose paediatrics, what she likes about it, what she doesn't like about it, and any advice she has for you guys out there. Why did you choose to do paediatrics?
I think everyone pretty much gets told this, that when you decide what you want to do, you either go with what you want or you eliminate the ones you don't. And I was definitely in the second camp. I wasn't like spoiled for choice when it came to medicine. You start whittling down, like I said, what you don't want to do. And so surgery and like psych were honestly off the list pretty early for me, and that left medicine as a whole. And then thinking within medicine, I made my way to pediatrics quite quickly. I think pediatrics was always sort of in the back of my mind because I have a pediatrician in the family. A really close relative is a neonatologist. Another big reason why I chose pediatrics because I wanted to be in a hospital. You work in a team and I like being a team member. It just feels like, even though sometimes the buck may stop with you, it never truly does. It feels like you have a safety net for most of the decisions that you make. And the value of like having an MDT there, like on site all the time, is actually really, really useful. The nice thing about peds is that you see such a range of ages in children. You see like babies, you see toddlers, and then all the way up like to the teenagers who have like a completely different set of issues than say a 2-year-old will. It just means that on a single ward round, you'll see such a range of stuff. You'll see like really core medical stuff, like say Kawasaki's disease. But then you also see a child, like a teenager with a mental health problem that they need hospitalization in for because they just cannot manage at home and the family are at their wits' end. It just makes for a really interesting mix of things. I feel like it keeps your like knowledge up to date a little bit, or forces you, I guess, to keep your knowledge up to date. It just keeps things interesting.
That's one thing I found really crazy about pediatrics is if you do adult medicine, adults are generally the same, and then you have kind of elderly care, which is a separate issue. But a 30-year-old is, you're treating them the same way as you treat a 40-year-old and a 50-year-old. Whereas with kids, like 2 and under, they're like a different species to then children who are a different species to teenagers, and they all have completely different problems. And I always found that so scary because you need to know everything about all these different types of conditions that they could be suffering from.
Yeah, and like not to forget the social aspect of care. Everyone needs to have that looked at. We obviously place emphasis on holistic care here in the NHS, as we should, but in children it's doubly important because the signs aren't obvious. The children can't tell you for themselves, and it's ultimately every person who comes into contact with that child's responsibility to pick up on something like that. It's just another layer to be aware of that makes like kids so different from adult medicine.
So we've heard about what you like about pediatrics. I'm sure there are certain things that you don't like. So do you want to go into that, just about what you've not really enjoyed about pediatrics so far?
8 years of training.
It is
a long
8 years.
time.
It's insane.
The long training aspect obviously makes it difficult, I think, on your personal life a little bit as well, when you have children, and
especially if you're having to move around or go to different hospitals and stuff.
Exactly,
You don't have
yeah.
that stability for quite a long time. I mean, people would go into training kind of mid to late 20s probably. So you're kind of mid 30s, late 30s before you're coming out as a consultant, which is quite late.
I have met people who've left pediatrics training because of that reason, you know. The other thing about peds is, like I said, you deal with parents a lot. Generally speaking, the parents' knowledge of what's going on is like on a vast spectrum. When you're doing something like a tertiary level neonates, which is extremely specialized and technical, you're dealing with a parent who has no idea what's going on. Their baby is like in an incubator away from them and they're just like a mess of anxiety. And so you deal with a lot of misplaced anger because of that all the time. Even on something like postnates, which is where mums and babies are together and they're each recovering from the delivery, but they feel like at a loss, or they feel anxious, or they feel like they don't know what's going on. And so you do kind of bear the brunt sometimes of their like frustration. The aim is to try and keep calm, but sometimes that does get away from you, and that's hard.
Was pediatrics something that you'd done as a job during F1 and F2, or was it just at medical school?
I didn't have any F1, F2 jobs in peds. They're actually pretty attractive in F1, F2 because you end up being, especially in F1, supernumerary. So they're only 9 to 5 jobs, Monday to Friday, and so all your weekends are your own, all your evenings are your own. So most people want pediatrics as an F1 or even as an F2. I tried to swap, I remember, in F2 and no one was really up for it. And F3 wasn't really an option for me just because of like my visa status. Because of that, I ended up doing a taster week.
Obviously pediatrics is such a different world compared to any other aspect of medicine. Going into it without having done a job in that, was that quite scary?
It is. It can be a fast-paced environment depending on the day. I did feel a little bit on the back foot, especially in neonates, and I think that's down to my personal skill set that I come into anything with. Don't get me wrong, in medicine we're all constantly learning, but things that we need to be good at are like stress management and like prioritization. I actually feel like I need work on that. Like I need to constantly be working on that. And neonates, wherever you do it, is actually really high, like fast-paced. So I felt that going into my first job, which was neonates, in like a really busy level 2 unit, I was stressed more than maybe my peers were. And I know everyone feels like that, and it probably is true to a degree, but looking back on it, definitely compared to other people, I was more stressed, and I think I was not dealing with that as well as I could have. People who like thrive in high stress diverse environments like will love it and will do really well. Don't get me wrong, there's lots of support for people who do struggle a little bit, but for me personally, I don't take to it instantly. Like, I need a little bit of work. I'm sure that you will have heard the same from people, but I've spoken to consultants who still say they suffer from imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I can imagine.
What am I doing here? I don't know, am I qualified to do this? Consultants, and like extremely competent consultants who I feel really confident when they're around. And if even they feel like that, clearly like whatever we're feeling in that moment of time of like weakness or because we're tired or whatever is, I think, normal.
Can you talk us through generally what a normal day looks like in the world of pediatrics?
So generally speaking, the day starts with prep for the handover first, and we always have half an hour of teaching in the morning. And so the half an hour teaching is usually by another like junior-ish doctor, and they'll talk about a case they've seen and they'll do teaching around the subject. And then we'll hand over usually for a pretty long time. Our handovers are pretty thorough in pediatrics. It takes as long as it takes, 45 minutes to an hour usually. Then we'll go on to the ward round, which can vary widely depending on the consultant running it. The ward round finishes usually around lunchtime. You peel off for lunch. Usually there's some kind of teaching at lunchtime as well, right?
Some sort of educational meeting, like grand round or stuff like that?
Yeah, like grand round or an x-ray meeting. And or it'll be psychosocial, where we'll talk about all the patient's psychosocial concerns. X-ray meetings are so good because it's usually where the senior like pediatric radiologist, even in a DJ, she'll come or he'll come for that meeting. They'll run through like all the x-rays of people that we need a second opinion about, or something like if something surprising was found, essentially get a second opinion. And those are such good learning for us as well. They point out all the signs. And then jobs, and there's lots of admin jobs. And most specialties you have them. Usually in DGHs or district general hospitals where we don't have all the specialties on site, it usually involves calling lots of hospitals. Lots of referrals, lots of updates. So you did bloods, what did you find? What do you want us to do now? Type thing. So we carry out other people's plans a lot. And then like bloods, cannulas, that type of usual thing. And then there's usually a separate A&E team like working on A&E the whole day. And so if they send up a sick patient, it may be an all hands on deck type of situation. And if they're really ill, it's all hands on deck to stabilize them and then get them to say a PICU in a different hospital, which takes up like the whole, like everyone's time. If you're on a long day, you do your third handover of the day at 5 p.m. and then you continue with, usually everyone ends up in A&E because that's when people come, right? After school, parents bring in their kids with whatever is happening to them, and then you triage, either admit or discharge. If you're supernumerary, you have quite a few people on hand. Like last week, I was one of like 2 extra people there, so I actually ended up going to clinic.
Is there any advice you'd want to give people watching right now who are potentially thinking about pediatric training?
I don't think that you need to necessarily think super early about pediatrics. You know, people will say that, and it's good. Don't get me wrong, you're not going to do anything wrong by getting experience or getting stuff published if you can, or just doing an audit or something in an area of interest, but it's not strictly necessary. The big thing for application is actually your portfolio. It's the most important station in your application process. So at that stage, actually having something to show as proof of your interest in pediatrics is really useful. So if you've, say, figured out your interest a little bit late, F3. If you can do an F3 or a job in peds during your F1, F2 years, like I would take it. And keeping evidence, even like written logs of what you've done, is really useful to show your commitment to the specialty.
So thanks for coming on the channel.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think you've given a lot of insight into pediatrics and a lot of honest takes about what it's like to be a pediatrician, kind of the good things and the bad things. So if any of you out there have any questions for Upasana or anything about pediatrics at all, just leave them down in the comments box below. If you've enjoyed the video, drop a like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.